Good afternoon, or in fact it's good morning, and it's the first Arty political broadcast where we're going to talk about pop, politics and culture as well. It's quite timely with the election coming up next week and the potential chance that the Tories are going to get in, and they're going to bring in a lot of cuts across the kind of music sphere. So I've got with me 3 panellists, and we'll start discussing it now. What we're going to start talking about is what each political party's idea to the arts is, and Kelly's quite well placed for this because you've actually done some research.
A small amount. Yeah, I think obviously we've all seen how the Labour deal with the arts. We do have, we have a lot of cultural activity in the UK, and I think obviously at the minute now it's as good as it's going to be for a long time. We know that whichever party gets in, there's going to be cuts. It's not going to be where it is now. But I think there's a big difference between the cuts made between the different parties. If you look at the Tory manifesto, they emphasise that the cultural sector is important, but they don't seem to have anything within that to say what they're going to do. I think they'll certainly make a lot of cuts, tax cuts. I would have thought they'll make cuts to the BBC licence fee as well, which is going to have massive effects. We've already seen what the BBC are looking to do, and with further cuts to licence fee, that's bad news, I think. The Lib Dems do actually they do have an arts section within their manifesto, so I think they do understand the relevance and the importance of the arts, and they're actually quite interesting in that they think that the arts shouldn't really have interference. They think that musicians and museums and artists should actually be able to determine what is culture, not necessarily the government. Obviously Labour, they still have an importance on the arts within their manifesto. They've been fairly good recently, but we haven't really got everything out of them that we would have liked from a government. We've been doing a lot of lobbying at national level with them to improve conditions, particularly for musicians, with things like the licensing laws and small venue exemptions, things like that. We haven't got as far as we'd have liked to have gotten, and I think the danger with a different party getting in is that the progress that we have made is just going to be washed away, and we'll have to start again, and it's going to take a bloody long time to get back there, I think.
So John, as a working musician, and a politically engaged working musician, it's quite rare these days. I mean, what do you think of the upcoming election and the attitude of the parties to the arts?
I think, to be honest, in lots of ways, like back a lot of my older friends who are musicians often say that, like, when they used to get dole and gyro, like back in the day, it used to be like an unofficial arts bursary. You used to be literally be able to kind of toss it off for weeks on end and just make music and stuff. And obviously, like, that's obviously not the case now. But I mean, I can only comment after coming into music maybe 6 or 7 years ago under a Labour government and stuff. But I can't say like conditions were particularly favourable in Sheffield. Like, you know what I mean? There's like Red Tape Studios, which is a council-run studios in Sheffield and stuff. But there were never like any like massive engagement in music, not at school or within the city itself, particularly like when I was growing up or anything like that. But I don't know, I can't particularly say that. I think Labour's been amazing for musicians, particularly because the majority of musicians I know are still struggling for money. The people who run small studios, which really to me are the lifeblood of the local scene and stuff, studios are closing all the time, and people are really struggling to make them work and stuff. Perhaps that's more a reflection on the state of the music industry rather than the government, but I don't believe that they've done much to help.
But do you think they can justify funding the arts? There's plenty of other problems going on. The Tories talk about getting rid of child benefits, etc., etc. How can they justify paying for arts? It's not really top of the pile, is it?
It's not top of the pile, I suppose, when compared to more pressing concerns and stuff. But by the same token, I think this government squanders a lot of money on various things. To be kind of super political for a minute, Trident, for instance, is £100 billion. I mean, even £2 billion to the arts would be a lot.
I think it's a crying shame, John, actually, that we're talking in terms of either or. You either fund the arts or you feed babies. And I think but that's how we're talking at the moment, isn't it? And I think it's an absolutely
But we're
crying
fucked.
shame.
There's no money, so.
But I think it comes back to down to what John was saying, in the sense that if you spend it properly, I think there is money out there. I definitely think there is money out there, but I don't think it's been spent correctly. And the other point I'd like to make is that as a sector, the cultural industries, we're responsible for 20% of the economy. That's huge. I mean, that is absolutely huge.
But where does that money all go? You know,
God knows. God knows.
Billions of pounds.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
They all just go into Phil Collins and Paul McCartney's pocket.
Probably, it probably does. But you know, you get into the situation where you really have to think about infrastructure, don't you? And you have to think about divvying this money up. And it comes back to the point that John's just made, is the sense that is the sense that it's all going in the wrong places, isn't it? But to me, if the Tories get in, and it's happening already, it can only go worse. And I'll just give you the example of higher education, arts funding higher education. I don't know if anyone's conversant with it here, but we get most of our funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, millions and millions and millions of pounds for each institution. It's all going. If you're doing stuff like theatre and performance, or you're doing innovative stuff, they're saying, oh God, no, because it doesn't have, it's either that, literally it is either that or putting bread in babies' mouths. It's all going. What we're having to do now is look to Europe to get funding. And if we do that, obviously it's going to have massive political implications, isn't it, about who we fund and what's funded. And I'm just thinking about, the stuff that I'm looking at, which is popular music, looking at all this kind of stuff, punk and how punk goes into the future, post-punk, indie music, independent music, recording, all of that kind of thing. Is some bureaucrat in Brussels or Luxembourg going to be asked about that at all? I don't know. Do you think
now you have to actually get sponsorship money off people like Gola or Umbro, because that's what's happening now. People have to go to ostensibly completely opposite style companies to get funding.
But that's I see that happening in I see that
funded.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I made some short. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, go on.
I made some.
It's an interesting point.
I made some short films. There's a lad called Sean Grant, who Kestrel Films they're called. He's a like dead talented local filmmaker. You know what I mean? And like, I wrote these films called Lies, right, about the lies we tell to each other, especially as children. I wanted to get these funding for these films. There were nobody going to give me funding. I've never made a film in my life. But I wrote this thing and I believed in it and stuff. So I just went to Box Fresh and I was like, can I have 12 grand and I'll wear your shirts? And more or less, and they were like, that's me being really honest. And they went, yeah.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, I've got no problem.
Like, you've got like a ostensibly a radical artist, which you are in the context of modern times, and you have to go to Box Fresh to get the money.
That's where everyone gets that. I'm not going to lie to you, like, that's where we have, my management has a guy whose job it is to go to companies, like, it's called corporate interfacing, they call it. He does it for gorillas and everyone, like, there's no artist, unless you're like Fugazi or someone, literally no artist in the world who can operate now without having an interaction with like corporate companies. It's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, just to finish that point, to a certain extent, I don't have a huge problem with that. It's just when
it's Robin Hood, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just when the other sector isn't there, the other choice isn't there, the funding that you get from government, the funding that should be given to you to develop the sector. If that's taken away, and the only thing you can do, which is, John, is what you're saying, is go to companies, go to corporate companies, then I think there's a real problem there, because it really does have these ideological implications, doesn't it? They're not going to fund extremely left field stuff. They're not going to give people a choice. The choice, I think, is just going to narrow and narrow and narrow. And I think that's what's going on if all of arts funding for innovative arts works comes from Europe. And to me that is one of the major debates that we're going to look at after the election. And I think, as you said, John, I think another one of these kind of get-togethers and debates when we actually know what's going to be happening after next Friday is a crucial thing.